Welcome back to Media Trip, everybody. This is Jason Triplett, and today we need to talk about Star Wars. This is the first in a potential series of videos I'm going to do where we need to talk about something, and this has been bugging me for a while. The whole Star Wars toxic fan base thing has really been bothering me a lot. I thought I'd like to put my 2 cents in on the matter, considering I have a long lifetime attachment to Star Wars. I just turned 40 this year, and that means A New Hope came out the year before I was born. And this also means that I've been exposed to Star Wars in some fashion or another for my whole life. From the moment I could understand the movies, I was hooked. So, I have a perspective on all of this that you could say comes from one of the old school fans. You know, I know a lot of the new fans, people who grew up with the prequels, or, you know, people who are just now getting into the movies and never had watched them before. They're going to have a different perspective than I do. And even some of the old timers like myself are going to have a different perspective than me. I really want to take more of a defensive posture for the series as a whole here, because I feel like it's being treated unjustly, and I'm going to explain to you why. So right now, I want to start with what really started all of this. George Lucas. Well, really, it started with Return of the Jedi. The first inkling of a toxic fan base came from the introduction of the Ewoks in Return of the Jedi. That was originally meant to be the Wookiee home planet of Kashyyyk, but a change was made, one of numerous changes to that film that introduced the child-friendly Ewoks. Now, personally, Return of the Jedi is my favorite of the entire saga. The first act alone, the entire rescue scene involving Jabba the Hutt and the sail barge and all that. I mean, that just, to me, that stands as the highest point of the series. You get to see Luke emerged in the black. He's a Jedi. He's got his own lightsaber. You don't know what the hell's going on. He comes out of nowhere, and boom, Jedi mind tricks and all this stuff. It really had an effect. But then also, the finale is fantastic. It's just fantastic. And I really appreciated, and you know, shoot me dead here, people, but I really appreciated the special editions for adding in celebrations across the galaxy. You know, the Empire had been defeated. Word spreads quick in an era of this type of technology. You know, I mean, think about it. Star Wars isn't based on legitimate science, folks. It's a fantasy. And it makes sense. They're all celebrating. They're all happy for a time. Well, George Lucas got a lot of flack for going back to the prequels and kind of fancifying everything. You know, we had all wanted to see the origins. At least most of us did. He had talked about it a lot, and it had the outline laid out. We had all heard stories of the grand battle between Anakin and Obi-Wan on an erupting volcano. And really, honestly, out of the entire prequel trilogy, that ended up being the best part of that trilogy. Being that he actually kept his story outline intact, at least in that matter, was fantastic. That lightsaber battle on Mustafar is one of the greatest sword fights in the history of film. And I don't care if you agree with me or not. I'm fanboying out at it, even just thinking about it. You know, that scene had a lot of weight to it. But where he really caught the most flack were the first 2 films. The third film was actually kind of seen as a redemption for a lot of fans because they were disappointed with the first 2 films. Now, personally, I love Phantom Menace. I think it was probably the most well-crafted of any of the new Star Wars movies. It had the most intricate detail and still didn't overburden it with CGI. I mean, there was still enough, muppetry and things like that to go around. Now, granted, Yoda didn't turn out that great, and thank you again for changing that. But, for the most part, it was a grand spectacle. Sure, Anakin was whiny. Luke was whiny when we first meet him. It seemed, fair to have a parallel between father and son here, and that's exactly what the Phantom Menace was, a parallel. Stuck on a desert planet, skilled with machinery, whiny, but still wants to do something more. We were given Qui-Gon Jinn, who, Liam Neeson did an amazing job as. But the point of contention started with Jar Jar Binks. And Ahmed Best actually went on record about this recently, saying that the bullying that he got regarding that really affected him heavily. George Lucas was blamed for being a racist just in general with the Phantom Menace because of the racial parallels of some of the races to human races. So for Jar Jar Binks to kind of have this flamboyant, okey doke, almost a Sambo type feel to it, it really didn't do well for George Lucas's side in that matter. What actually happened though is that George Lucas wanted Jar Jar Binks to be a ruthless bounty hunter of some sort that gets caught up with the Jedi and starts helping them. It didn't work out in the way that he wanted, and he knew that Anthony Daniels as C-3PO was going to be a very minimal presence in the movie and not enough to be the comedic relief that he was in the later films. So he needed some kind of, lightheartedness to open the film up a little more. And he asked Ahmed Best to create a character. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. George Lucas gave him a little bit of a guideline, but Jar Jar Binks was all Ahmed Best, who I might add, if you haven't, seen him, he's a black man. So for a black man to create a character out of his own heart, play it, fantastically in my opinion, but then be called racist for it, I mean, you can see why it affected him so deeply. But all that aside, it still did fantastic box office. It opened up Star Wars to a whole new generation of fans. It was monumental and probably the last major old school production piece before this new era of full-on CGI. When the Clone Wars came about, Attack of the Clones, much was being made about digital cinema, and as a matter of fact, I got to see it on a digital screen the day that it opened, and it was beautiful. It was like nothing I've ever seen. But the movie itself is just a lot of flash, and the substance can be questionable to some. The love scenes, things like that. You can criticize it any which way you want. They wanted what I think the fans wanted was a dark centerpiece film, but Lucas couldn't do that because the third piece was the dark film in that trilogy. It needed to be more filler. It needed to be filler because you have to get from point A to point B. And you have to establish why Anakin was so susceptible to turning to the dark side. And it's because just of who he was, whiny person. Let's face it. He whined a lot, just like Luke. Luke whined through most of that trilogy, and up until Return of the Jedi, where he was, beyond all that. But he did spend a lot of time whining to this person, whining to that person, whining about something. It was a good parallel. And it makes Anakin an emotional human. And an emotional human could very well get drawn into a plot. And now that it's pretty much all but certain that Palpatine is Anakin's father, whichever way you want to say that happened, it also kind of leads into, why Anakin turned. Because, it's his own father. He had a father and son talk with him at the opera. He almost just latches onto him right away, and it's just like, we don't see a lot of the relationship that happened between episode 1 and 2, and there was a lot there, a lot of trust built between those two, you can bet. But anyways, when it gets to Revenge of the Sith, George Lucas had some sort of a redemption. He didn't really stray from his story, it's just that the story picked up in the direction that people wanted it to pick up. Okay. But, the backlash from the prequel trilogy was enough to make George Lucas say, I'm not going to go and make a sequel trilogy. I'm just not going to do it, because you can't please everyone. When you have millions of people watching your product, you're not going to please everybody. It's just not going to happen. And I think that's something that the fan base really needs to understand. These movies are not made just for you. You might feel like it, or you might want them to be, but they're not. They're made for open consumption, and how you take them is how you take them. That doesn't mean you should get to dictate how the rest of the story goes to suit your needs when there are millions of other people out there enjoying this product. So that brings us to the Disney sale. And what George Lucas did here was very honorable, in my opinion, by selling Star Wars and basically all his properties to Disney dirt cheap, and then donating the money to charity. He wanted Star Wars to live on. He just didn't want to be a part of the madness that came along with it anymore. I think he wanted to enjoy being a husband to his wife and kind of see what somebody else would do with it. And let's not forget, George Lucas didn't direct every single Star Wars movie. He did pass it off. So, in fact, one of the, most agreed upon best film in the saga, Empire Strikes Back, was directed by somebody else. So, there you have it. Disney had no problem jumping right into this. They had their own ideas right away, what they wanted to do. They were nothing like what George Lucas wanted to do, and that's probably for the better, because I don't think people would have liked that either. They still would have dogged him. It doesn't matter which way this would have went, that toxic fan base would have still been there. The Force Awakens or not. Mara Jade and the Solo twins or not. You're never going to please everybody, and there would have been backlash still. That leads us to The Force Awakens. And with The Force Awakens, it caught a lot of flack for a lot of different reasons. And still, I think that bled off into The Last Jedi and even into Solo. With The Force Awakens, them passing off Rey as a Mary Sue, which is, something stupid. Come on, people. Anyways, it created a continuation of a universe in a way that they were not expecting, and they lashed back at it. But after a little bit of time, The Force Awakens seemed to kind of win people over a little bit, just like The Phantom Menace did. And, people had high hopes for The Last Jedi. And that brings us into the most contentious part of this toxic fan base to date, The Last Jedi. People flipped their lids over it for a few different reasons. We'll go ahead and just address the elephant in the room right away. Let's talk about Luke. People were unhappy with the way that Luke was handled in the film. and they were, upset in that he, almost had a fall, it seemed, to the dark side, that he would even consider killing Kylo, even for a moment, and then go into hiding, in shame. But if you really think about it, and you look at Luke Skywalker as who he was, leave the extended universe books out of it, but look at Luke as who he was as established through the films, he was a whiny kid who had very little Jedi training. Look at how Yoda trained him compared to what Jedi had to train back in the Old Republic days. Okay? He barely had any training. Yoda dies. He doesn't fully know how to be a Jedi yet. I think even at opening up the school, he still didn't know everything. Even the ancient Jedi texts couldn't teach him everything. That's why there was an apprenticeship program in place. You needed mentorship. Luke had none. Luke was left alone as the last Jedi. So think about that. I mean, isn't it the human condition to screw up sometimes? What is so wrong with showing that he could have a moment of weakness? In the comic books, he fell to the dark side. Nobody complained about that. They actually applauded it. We don't know what he saw in Kylo Ren's mind. We don't know exactly what he saw. Could it have been just the destruction of the temple and the murder of all of the students? Or could it have been more than that? Could it have been something that we've not seen yet because it's in the next film? He saw something horrible that made him have that momentary lapse of reason, and it makes sense. And then, of course, he's ashamed because he screwed up. He doesn't understand that the legacy of the Jedi is failure. And it is. If you look at all of the films, the legacy of the Jedi is failure. It's just the way it is. He was bound to fail. Yoda pretty much told him this when they sat there as the tree burned. But Luke got to redeem himself. He knew he screwed up and that he had to fix it in some way. He wasn't strong enough to fight Kylo Ren in the flesh. Their epic battle at the end of the film, he was a force projection. He knew he needed to do something more, so he willingly gave himself to the Force in the same way that Obi-Wan did for him in A New Hope. Because if you really think that Vader's saber just disintegrated Obi-Wan, then, what are you even watching these films for? Come on, people. Obi-Wan intentionally gave himself up to the Force because he knew he could be greater help to Luke as a Force ghost, speaking through the Force. And now that's what we have with Luke Skywalker. Maybe people were upset about it, but come on, we all figured that all of the old school cast was going to be pushed out somehow in this trilogy, probably through death, and pass it on to a new generation. And this still opens up Mark Hamill to appear as Luke Skywalker in future films, without having to dedicate the time of being a full-time actor as well. The other point of contention with The Last Jedi is in the character Rose Tico. And Kelly Marie Tran has also been bullied And this is also, it's most recent, so you guys have probably seen the news stories. I believe she quit Twitter. She's just been hounded for this, and she didn't even do a bad job. It's not even her fault. It's the fan base's fault. Now, I will concede that the casino segment of The Last Jedi is anticlimactic. It's the polar opposite of the intense feeling of, urgency. The spaceship, it's the last remnants of the rebellion. They're moments away from getting destroyed forever. Oh, let's go to this casino planet. I get it. But it still worked. It might have been better in a different movie. If it was in a different setting, I think that people wouldn't have seen it so bad. It is what it is. She didn't do a bad job at the character. I think her character is a necessity to show Finn, one, he really is a true hero, and that people now, they know him. They know who he is. Okay? And then two, to maybe open up his eyes to his real love interest. Because when Rose kisses him, there's a look on his face, and you can almost sense that he's, he's thinking about Rey. No, not Poe Dameron. I'm sorry, guys. Yeah, that's not going to happen. Rey is the love interest. That's kind of where it was headed up. The Last Jedi kind of cemented it, even though it was very subtle. Rose was not intended to be his love interest. It was intended to open up Finn's eyes. Okay? And it did. But what is it with the bullying? I mean, what is the point of that? This actor did her best. She did a good job. And she's hounded for it. Accused of being some social warrior justice crap, whatever. I mean, there's social justice warrior crap in everything. Nobody complains about all the social justice warrior crap in the Marvel stuff. Oh, that gets a pass. So, it's nothing new. They've hounded Star Wars actors in the past. We've talked about Ahmed Best. We should have mentioned Jake Lloyd. He was famously hounded for his performance as young Anakin, to the point where, I mean, have you seen the poor guy? It drove him absolutely insane. It's not fair. The bullying continued on into Solo. Not so much towards the cast this time, but towards Kathleen Kennedy. Now, the hate for The Last Jedi spilled over into Solo unfairly and tainted the movie in a way that I do not think was fair for that film. Solo was actually really enjoyable, in my opinion, and I was very skeptical. It was the most skeptical I've been of the entire saga, and I came away absolutely just pleased. I loved it. I was worried about a new actor playing Han. I wasn't worried about Lando because, Donald Glover was amazing. But I was worried about, a new actor playing such an iconic role of Han Solo. And although it was a little weird at first, in the first, few minutes getting used to him, it happened real quick, and then I enjoyed the film. The film was also accused of being social justice warrior crap because Lando was revealed to be something called pansexual. Well, some people out there think that means that they would have sex with kids or dogs or things like that. It wasn't anything like that. Lando truly cared for his droid, and when she died, he showed it. What's wrong with that? I mean, you know what I mean? It's not like they were having sex or anything like that. Well, there was a joke made about it, but that was actually really funny. The droid herself was actually making fun of social justice warriors, which is hilarious to me. It just came off completely overdone, like it was made to be a joke. So there was that. But all of this fell down on one person's shoulders, Kathleen Kennedy. And regardless of what you might think of Kathleen Kennedy, she wasn't the only one making the decisions. Somebody else out there is also going along with it, and that's Pablo Hidalgo. A lot of people don't like to talk about Pablo Hidalgo for some reason. Nobody's even mentioned him. He is the person that determines what's canon and what's not. He took a beating after he wiped out the extended universe, but after that, it's like people forgot about him. So this wasn't just a one-person decision to go ahead with these stories that had been pre-written for a while now. It was a multi-person team decision, but yet they called for Kathleen Kennedy's head. Now, it's obvious that's not going to happen. Star Wars has still been making good money, and even though Solo underperformed, it still did well enough to consider it a success. Although many of the troll YouTube channels out there would call it a flop. It might not have reached targets, but it made its money back. If it doesn't make its money back, that's when it's a flop or a failure. We're not talking about Battlefield Earth here. We're talking about Star Wars. Even Iron Man 3 made a lot of money. So, really, in the end, we have to think about, what happens if we force everybody to have the same opinion about everything. You get upset to the point where you're going to bully somebody, sometimes to the point where they're suicidal or they get strung out on drugs. And for what? A movie? America, world, I think we need to start taking a look at ourselves here. You're never going to like every single thing that somebody else likes, and they're never going to like every single thing that you like. You can accept that you don't like The Last Jedi, or that you don't like Solo, or that you think Jar Jar Binks sucks. But why attack somebody else because they do like them? You forget that a large amount of children watch Star Wars, either through the animated series, the popular Lego Star Wars stuff, and the films themselves. It's not just grown people, it's children. A lot of you listening right now might have been children when The Phantom Menace came out. You see where I'm going with this? These movies don't belong to you. They belong to everybody. And at the end of the day, you need to ask yourself, what kind of person are you going to be? Everybody wants to accuse people of being Nazis these days, but it's always those type of people that are doing the most fascist stuff. I mean, okay, Antifa aside, that's pretty obvious, but the stifling of free speech is crazy. And then the hypocrisy and the bullying aspect is just, I don't even understand. You should never bully unless it's somebody you really don't like. That doesn't make any sense, people. Take a step back. Take another look at Star Wars. See it for what it is. Just try to drop all these preconceived notions that you have and just try to enjoy it for what it is. It's a movie. It's not going to be the end of the world if it's something you don't like. Watch them again. You may find something you like. Go in with a fresh pair of eyes, a new perspective. You never know. You might come out very surprised. Now, that's pretty much all I have to say on this subject. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that I'm biased in favor of Star Wars. I love it. I love all of the films. I've been a lifelong fan, and it just breaks my heart to see the fan base tearing each other apart. So this was the only reason I decided to make this video. I say, let's stop. If you just don't like it, then just find something else. There's millions of other movies out there, you know. Find something else. Don't attack people in the real world for something in the fantasy world. Let's not be like that. Instead, let's bring it back to what the Star Wars fandom was once upon a time, where we would all come together and enjoy it for what it was. It's become depressing. But not because the films are bad, but because the fans are bad. And if you're one of those fans, then I apologize. I don't mean to insult you. But you have to understand that that's not the right way. You can feel free to hate something all you want. But when you start attacking other people for it, that's when it becomes the problem. And that's where we stand right now. Is people who hate these films for whatever reason attacking other people because they do like them. Or attacking people because they were involved in making them, which is just as bad. So, I know I might have rubbed some of you the wrong way. I'd love to hear what you guys think about this in the comments. Please try to keep it a little friendly. Let's not start attacking each other in the comments. That would just be counterintuitive to this video as a whole. But I would love to hear your opinions. Please give me a like and subscribe if you like this, or maybe you're interested in what other topics are coming up in the future. I also do a lot of live streams. Make sure to tick that notification bell and you can be notified when I go live with one of various games that I'm playing right now. I want to thank you guys for sitting here and listening to this kind of rant. I hope that maybe I have opened up some of your eyes. Even if just one of you found value in this, it makes the whole video worth it. Thank you guys again, and I'll see you next time right here on Media Trip.